Easy, man. It's just for a year. I marry her, get access to her father's logistics network, secure the merger, and then I cut her loose. Claire is naive. She'll never see it coming. These were the words the groom Ethan whispered to his best man moments before stepping into the church. He just didn't know that, through a crack in the door, Claire herself heard everything. Ethan believed he was in complete control, about to pull off the deal of a lifetime, but he had no idea that the humiliation of that day wasn't going to be hers. What she would do next wasn't a cancellation. It was a reckoning. Just 30 minutes earlier, the hall connected to the chapel was a hive of wealth and influence. Photographers moved like discreet predators, capturing the forced smiles of the guests. Claire stared at her reflection in the mirror. The gown, an exorbitant creation chosen by her mother-in-law, felt like a suit of armor. It was beautiful, but it wasn't her. The door opened, and Eleanor, Ethan's mother, entered. Her eyes were like chips of ice, performing a critical scan. She didn't smile. She simply approached and adjusted an imperceptible fold in Claire's veil. "Remember your posture," she said, her voice low and sharp as glass. "From today on, every step you take reflects on our family. Do not disappoint us." The threat was unmistakable. The door opened again, and this time it was Frank, her father. His suit was simple but impeccably clean. His watery eyes brimmed with a pride that warmed the chilly room. "My girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the most beautiful bride this world has ever seen." He hugged her, a gesture of genuine love amidst so much pretense. "I know their world is different from ours, but you're stronger than all of them. Never forget that." He kissed her forehead, leaving behind the scent of honesty. As her father left, Claire peeked through the door. What she saw was a social battlefield. On one side, Ethan's business partners, men in dark suits and expensive watches, discussed stocks and contracts as if they were in a boardroom. On the other, Eleanor's friends, women sculpted by Botox, analyzed every detail with hawk-like gazes. And huddled near a corner table were her few aunts and uncles, out of place and uncomfortable, like exotic birds in a golden cage. Then Ethan arrived. He was the picture of perfection. Bright white smile, flawless hair. He gave Claire a kiss, but the gesture was for the photographer's camera. "Ready for the show, my love?" he whispered in her ear. The word show sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could answer, he had already turned to a group of investors, his handshake firm, his smile now a business tool. He left her there, an accessory bride. She watched as Eleanor approached Ethan, whispering something and glancing disdainfully toward Frank, who was chatting cheerfully with one of the waiters. Ethan chuckled, a low, cruel sound. "Let the old man have his dream, mother. In 6 months, the only thing that will matter from that family is their shipping routes." It was then that a wedding planner called out, "Ethan, best man, 1 minute in the sacristy, please, for photos." Claire felt a pang of panic. She had forgotten. Her grandmother's brooch, a gift from her father, was still in her purse in the small ready room. She excused herself and hurried toward the room, her path taking her down a corridor that ran right past the sacristy door. And it was then, as she passed the heavy wooden door, that she heard his voice, stripped of all pretense. And she froze. The voice that delivered the sentence that would change everything. The air rushed out of Claire's lungs. Ethan's words weren't like a knife. They were like a venom, paralyzing every muscle in her body. She backed away from the door, step by step, taking refuge in the small room she had just left. Her reflection confronted her, a pale woman in a bridal costume, her eyes wide with horror. Every detail of his scheme replayed in her mind. Get access to the contacts. Cut her loose. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a calculated attack on her family, on her father's dignity, on a lifetime of hard work. He saw her as a stepping stone, an object to be used and discarded. The word naive burned in her memory, the ultimate humiliation. Suddenly, the silence was broken. The church organ began to play the wedding march. The melody, which should have been a dream, sounded like a siren, announcing the start of her public execution. The door opened, and her father, Frank, walked in. His face was the purest expression of happiness. "It's time, sweetheart," he said, extending his arm to her, his eyes shining with pride. "Your groom is waiting for you. Everyone is." Claire looked at that face, the face of the man Ethan planned to destroy. Telling him now would mean crushing him in front of hundreds of people who already looked down on him. She couldn't. Not there. Not like that. In a split second, a cold resolve formed in her chest. She wasn't going to run. She was going to see this through to the end. She swallowed the pain, the tears, the rage, and buried it all beneath a mask of serenity. With a trembling hand, she took her father's arm. Frank smiled, thinking it was just bridal nerves. He didn't see the ice in her eyes. He didn't feel that the woman he was leading to the altar was no longer his daughter, but a predator who had just chosen her prey. Did your heart sink watching Claire walk silently toward her own trap? If you felt the injustice of this scene and are desperately rooting for her comeback, leave a yes in the comments. We want to know who is with her on this journey to the very end. As her feet carried her down the marble aisle, Claire's mind disconnected. The sound of the organ, the faces of the guests, Ethan's fake smile waiting at the altar, it all dissolved into a distant hum. Her memory, in an act of self-preservation, transported her back 10 years to the one place she always felt safe. Her father's small, cluttered office at the back of the logistics warehouse. The scene was at night. A young Claire, then an exhausted law student, was hunched over a pile of papers under the yellow light of a desk lamp. The smell was of strong coffee and dusty files, not imported lilies. She was analyzing the company's first major logistics contract, a document the other party's lawyer had assured them was standard. But Claire, with her trained eyes, found the poison hidden in Clause 12b, a single line that, in the event of any delay, no matter how small, would transfer the liability for crippling fines to her father's company, bankrupting them in months. She remembered calling for Frank. He came into the office, his face tired from a day of manual labor, and she explained the trap, her voice steady, pointing to the sentence on the paper. Frank didn't question her. He didn't doubt his daughter for a second. He just listened, his eyes shifting from concern to immense pride. With her discovery, he was able to renegotiate the contract from a position of strength. She had saved the company. That night, after everything was settled, Frank opened a drawer in his old wooden desk. He pulled out a small, worn velvet box. Inside rested a black fountain pen with silver details. It wasn't luxurious, but it had the weight of history. "This was your grandfather's pen," Frank said, placing it in Claire's hand. "With it, he signed the purchase of our first truck. With it, I signed the deed to this land. It has never touched paper to seal a dishonest deal." He held her hand, the warmth of his touch a seal of trust. "Honey, the world out there is full of people like that lawyer, people who use words to deceive, but you're different. Remember this forever. Your signature isn't just your name on paper, it's your honor." The memory faded. Claire was just a few feet from the altar. Honor. Ethan had none. His word was garbage. Discreetly, her fingers touched the cold, hard object she had hidden inside the flowers of her bouquet. It was her grandfather's fountain pen, her something old. The memory didn't bring her comfort. It brought her purpose. That object was no longer an heirloom. It was a weapon. Frank placed Claire's hand on Ethan's. His touch was cold, possessive, and for Claire it was like the click of a hammer. The pain that had paralyzed her moments before receded, replaced by a sharp, icy clarity. The bride's heart stopped beating, and the lawyer's brain took complete control. The priest began to speak, the words about love and union becoming insignificant background noise. For Claire, that altar was no longer a symbol of love. It was a courtroom, and she was there to litigate the case of her life. As the priest spoke, her mind worked at top speed. Ethan's confession wasn't an outburst, it was testimony. She began to dismantle it, piece by piece, just as she would a fraudulent contract. Secure the merger, get the contacts, cut her loose. And the words formed a clear pattern. This wasn't just betrayal, it was conspiracy to commit fraud. A hostile takeover disguised as a marriage, with the clear objective of financial gain. Every word he had spoken was a nail in his own coffin, and Claire pictured every one of them. Ethan, noticing her pale face, leaned in and whispered, his expensive breath smelling of arrogance. "Nervous, my love. Relax. In a few hours this will all be over and we'll be celebrating." He smiled, convinced he was looking at a fragile, intimidated bride. He couldn't have been more wrong. He saw the naive girl he had described, failing to realize that she was looking back at him and seeing a defendant. His comment was the final push she needed. Under the guise of adjusting her bouquet, her nimble fingers slid over the phone, hidden among the white roses. A double click of the volume button, a discreet shortcut she had configured weeks ago. A subtle vibration confirmed it. The microphone was active, recording. Now, not only would her words be recorded, but so would Ethan's, picked up by the lapel mic he wore so proudly. The trap was set. Her eyes then made a quick scan of the room. Not as a bride, but as a general mapping the terrain. She located the videographer's main camera, its red light glowing, an impassive glass eye that would document everything. She noted a second camera, positioned to capture the guests' reactions. And most importantly, she saw the audience, dozens of phones held high, ready to post, to stream, to immortalize the moment. The public record was guaranteed. The plan, once a blur of rage, was now crystal clear in her mind. It had phases, it had a strategy. She wouldn't just expose him. She would make him lie first. She would make him swear in front of everyone to be the exact opposite of what he was. She would lead him to the edge of the cliff and make him jump all on his own. The priest stopped talking and turned to Ethan. The time for vows had arrived. Claire lifted her chin. The time for preparation was over. It was time to execute the sentence. The priest turned to Claire. "And do you, Claire, take Ethan to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The silence stretched. All eyes were fixed on her, waiting for the "I do" that would seal her fate. Ethan looked at her with a victorious smile, the trophy about to be claimed. Claire took a deep breath, not to say "I do," but to gather her strength for the battle that was about to begin. She turned to the priest, a gesture of respect that was, in fact, an act of taking command. "Father, with your permission, and that of everyone present, before I say my vows, I would like to say a few words." A murmur rippled through the church. It wasn't a murmur of gossip, but of shock. In the rigidly choreographed world of Eleanor and Ethan, a deviation from the script was an earthquake. Eleanor shot daggers at Claire with her eyes, the rage clear on her face. Ethan's smile vanished for a second, replaced by confusion. The cameras, previously on a wide shot, zoomed in for a close-up on Claire's face. The show, as Ethan had called it, was finally beginning. Claire didn't look at him. Instead, she turned slightly, her gaze sweeping over her father, his partners, the investors in the front row. Her voice, when she spoke, was perfectly calm, amplified by the microphone, filling every corner of the chapel. "We are all here today to celebrate a union of two people, and also of two families, and of course a union of two companies. A marriage, after all, is a contract, the most serious one of all, and the foundation of any contract is trust, a given word." She paused, letting the word contract hang in the sacred air, an alien and uncomfortable object. Then she turned and locked her eyes on Ethan. The warmth and love he expected to see there had been replaced by cold, polished steel. "Ethan," she said, her voice still level, "we all heard your wonderful vows, but before I give mine, I need to ask you a question. Not as your future wife, but as your future business partner." The shock in the room was palpable. The phrase, business partner, was like a slap. Ethan blinked, caught completely off guard. The game had changed, without him even realizing it. Claire continued, relentless. Do you remember what you said to my father when you both signed the preliminary merger agreement at our house? You looked him in the eye and said that your word, the honor of your family name, was the greatest asset you were bringing to this negotiation. Do you remember saying that, Ethan? The question echoed in the dead silence. It was a perfect trap. To deny it would be to call her father a liar in front of everyone. To confirm it would be to chain himself to a standard of honor she knew he didn't possess. For a second, panic flashed in his eyes. He tried to compose himself, forcing a laugh. Of course I do, my love. Honor is everything. You know that. His answer was weak. The confidence had evaporated. The guests, once bored, were now on the edge of their seats, their phones recording openly. They didn't know what was happening, but they understood one thing. The naive, quiet bride had just seized control, and she wasn't finished yet. The smile of relief on Claire's face didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so glad you feel that way, Ethan," she said, her voice still soft, but with a weight that made the air feel thicker. "Because honor truly is everything. It is the foundation of a marriage, of a partnership, of a life." She paused, her gaze sweeping the front row, landing for an instant on her father, and then returning like a blade to Ethan. "That's why it is so devastating when that foundation is revealed to be rotten, when we discover that the words spoken in public are just theater, and the true intentions are confessed in secret." Ethan's face began to transform. Confusion gave way to a cold, creeping dread. "Claire, what are you doing? Stop this circus," he hissed, his voice low, desperate. His mother, Eleanor, made a move to stand, a gesture of someone about to intervene and restore order, but something in Claire's expression made her freeze in her seat. Claire ignored him completely. Her attention was now on the guests, the partners, the videographers. She was the conductor of this macabre orchestra. "Today," she said, her voice cracking with real, palpable pain, "minutes before the ceremony, fate placed me behind a door. And I heard another promise, a promise that wasn't for me, but it was about me. A promise about the future that awaited me." Slowly, as if in a ritual, she raised the hand holding the bouquet. With the other, she reached between the flowers and pulled out her cell phone. The gesture was so unexpected, so out of place, that an absolute silence fell over the church. All the phones that were previously recording for fun were now recording with a predatory intensity. That small rectangle of glass and metal became the most important object in the world. Claire looked at Ethan, whose eyes were wide with pure terror. "So, I just wanted to know which of your versions is the real one, Ethan. The one who promised to honor me forever, or the one on this recording?" And then she pressed play. The chapel's high-fidelity sound system, designed for celestial hymns, broadcast Ethan's raw, arrogant voice to every corner. "Easy, man. It's just for a year. I marry her, get access to her father's logistics network, secure the merger, and then I cut her loose. Claire is naive. She'll never see it coming." His voice, followed by the best man's mocking laughter, echoed and then died, leaving a vacuum behind. The silence that followed wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a solid, heavy object, pressing down on everyone. No one moved, no one breathed. The only sound was a crystal glass slipping from a guest's hand and shattering on the marble floor. Ethan's face was a blank canvas. All the blood had drained from it. The videographer, a top professional, kept the camera locked on him, capturing the collapse of an empire in real time. In that instant, power had shifted. It was no longer in Eleanor's money or Ethan's last name. It was in the palm of Claire's hand, who held the phone as if it were her enemy's heart, still beating. The evidence had been presented. There was no possible defense. The silence was finally shattered by Eleanor's shrill voice. She shot to her feet, her face a mask of fury and denial. "Stop this right now!" she screamed, her royal composure shattered. "This is a farce, an obvious lie from an unstable girl who couldn't handle the pressure. Security! Get this woman out of here!" She pointed a trembling finger at Claire, trying to paint the victim as the aggressor, a last, desperate attempt to rewrite reality. But no one moved. The security guards remained paralyzed, looking at the altar, unsure of whose orders to take. The guests' eyes weren't on Eleanor. They were on Frank. Claire's father rose from his seat. He didn't run, he didn't shout. With the terrifying calm of a man whose soul has been deeply offended, he walked down the aisle, climbed the steps of the altar, and stood, not beside his daughter, but directly in front of Ethan. He ignored the bride, the priest, and the enraged mother-in-law. His eyes, once full of paternal pride, were now as hard as stone. "I opened the doors of my home to you," Frank said, his voice low, but every word resonated with a monumental weight. "I shook your hand. I called you son. I trusted you with the future of my business, but more importantly, I trusted you with my daughter." He paused, his gaze fixed on Ethan's pale face. "You used the word honor at my table." Then Frank turned slightly, his body now addressing the partners and investors who were watching, motionless. His voice grew louder, firmer, the voice of a company president making an official announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, and no one dared to look away. "In the presence of all of you as witnesses, I, Frank Miller, hereby declare that the merger agreement between Miller Logistics and any company belonging to the Vance family is, as of this exact moment, terminated. It is nullified due to bad faith, breach of trust, and an explicit attempt at fraud. Any document bearing my signature is now worthless." The sanction was instant and brutal. It was a financial execution, broadcast live. One of the older investors, a man known for his nose for disaster, shook his head slowly and pulled out his phone, starting to type a furious message. Others exchanged dark looks. The whispers that followed were no longer of curiosity, but of condemnation. "It's over for him," one said. "What a humiliation," another commented. The social chorus, which had once looked down on Frank's simplicity, now admired his strength and looked at Ethan with nothing but contempt. Ethan finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of his ruin. The wedding was the least of it. The money, the power, the future. It was all evaporating. "Frank, please, wait," he stammered, taking a step forward. We can fix this." Frank didn't even grant him a glance. He simply turned, his back to the broken man, and walked to Claire. He put a firm, protective arm around her shoulders. Father and daughter, together, dignified and unshakable. Poetic justice had been served. The con man stood alone at the altar, stripped of everything, with 100 cell phones recording his fall for eternity. Amidst the chaos of whispers and guests hastily departing, Claire gave her father's arm a gentle touch, a silent signal that she needed to finish this alone. She slipped out of his protective embrace and took a step forward, facing Ethan one last time. The crowd, which was already dispersing, stopped. The final act was not yet over. Ethan looked at her with the empty eyes of a man who had lost everything on a single bet. The arrogance, the confidence had all drained away, leaving only a pathetic shell. "Claire," he whispered, her name a breath of desperation. I don't know what to say." Claire showed no hatred, not even contempt. There was only a sad clarity in her gaze. With a slow, deliberate movement, she pulled the engagement ring from her finger. The diamond, enormous and cold, which Eleanor had insisted she wear, felt heavy, like a shackle. She didn't throw it. With the solemnity of someone shedding a burden, she walked to the altar and placed it gently on the priest's open book, a return to sender. "There's nothing to be said, Ethan," she replied, her voice calm but cutting. "I was willing to give you everything I had. My love, my loyalty, my future. All you wanted in return were the contacts for my father's company." The simplicity of the truth was more brutal than any scream or accusation. She then turned and for the last time reached into her now tattered bouquet. From it she pulled the old black fountain pen, the symbol of her honor. She approached Ethan, who took a step back, as if the object would burn him. "My father taught me that the most valuable thing a person owns is their word," she said, holding the pen. He gave me this to remind me that a signature is a promise, that it carries the weight of your honor. She didn't hand the pen to him. Instead, she placed it on the altar next to the diamond ring. The contrast was stark. On one side, the symbol of material value, of lies and greed. On the other, the symbol of integrity, of work and truth. "I guess no one ever taught you what that word means," she concluded. Without waiting for a reply, Claire turned. She turned her back on her groom, on the altar, on the life that had nearly destroyed her. She walked steadily toward her father, who waited with eyes full of tears and infinite love. He embraced her, and together, father and daughter walked back down the aisle, heads held high, leaving behind the ruins of a man who never knew what it meant to have value. The video from that day, recorded by dozens of phones, spread like wildfire. The Wedding of Truth scandal, as it became known, dominated the headlines for months. For the Vance family, time brought consequences. For the Miller family, it brought justice. 1 year later, a polished glass sign reflects the sunlight. Miller and daughter, corporate ethics law. Inside a modern, light-filled office, Claire, now with an air of serene authority, advises a young entrepreneur. She is no longer the naive bride, but one of the most respected lawyers in the city, specializing in restructuring companies based on transparency and integrity. Frank, her father, serves as a senior consultant, his logistics company more prosperous than ever. As for Ethan, his fall was as spectacular as his arrogance. The video destroyed his reputation. Investors abandoned him overnight, and his family's company, a house of cards built on dubious deals, collapsed amidst lawsuits and debt. The last anyone heard, he was facing fraud charges, a man who had lost his name, his fortune, and his honor. The final shot focuses on Claire's oak desk. Next to her state-of-the-art computer, in an acrylic stand, rests the old black fountain pen. She no longer uses it to sign documents. The object now serves as a constant reminder, a silent monument proving that, in the end, true strength doesn't come from the power you wield, but from the integrity you refuse to lose. Claire's journey shows us that true strength isn't found in wealth or power, but in the courage to defend one's own honor. If this story moved you and made you believe in justice, show your support by leaving a like on this video. We love to know how far our stories travel, so comment the name of your city down below. We'll be sure to read and reply. So you don't miss any of our stories about overcoming the odds and incredible turnarounds, subscribe and join our community. Don't go just yet. I've picked out 2 other amazing stories for you to watch right now. They're appearing on your screen. Just pick one and click. I'll see you in the next video.